All right, everyone, welcome to our stream. This is Mike Strachan and Baodi Ngo here to teach you all, or at least help guide you through your PMP experience. Both Baodi and I have been PMP instructors for many years. I think between us, we got about 14, 15 years of instruction combined. Been teaching for multiple versions of the PMBOK guide, multiple certifications through PMI. This is not our first rodeo. All right, but this is our first rodeo with live streaming on YouTube, which has gone like the Bay of Pigs. And so we'll figure it out. It'll just take us a little while. We've been talking about doing this YouTube thing for a while. I think the first conversation we had about doing this was like in 2000, like 20 or something, maybe earlier. And now we're finally learning it as we do it, which is probably not the way to do this, but we'll get it. We'll get it down. How you doing, Bowdy?
I'm doing all right. My mic with this, yeah, I gotta figure out my mic.
Your mic is doing like my YouTube live. It's just
There you
cool
go.
now. All right.
That's a lot better. Yeah, not too bad, man. I'm not doing too bad.
So let's see. I just wrapped up a PMP class. It was military. What was the last class you did
Let's see. I was teaching a course up in DC, but you know what? I taught a class last weekend.
last weekend?
Yeah,
I told
online
you
on the
PMP.
weekends.
PMP.
PMP, yeah,
Good stuff. And in the I guess the rate at which we teach is, different. I tend to teach almost weekly. Bowdy teaches what, monthly? Or do you teach?
I would say yeah. I would say monthly. Usually on the weekends most of the time.
So I'm coming up on busy season here. Like March is always nuts for me. Like I'm teaching every day from
Yowzers.
what was it, the week before March starts all the way through like April 7th or something. And I got weekend classes in there too. I think I got a total of 3 days off in all of March. It always happens. But I mean, there's a reason why I think it's gonna be so packed. That Pinbach 8th edition is coming out
Right.
and everyone's going nuts, just like every time a new
Yeah.
PMBOK comes out. Everyone's wondering how it's going to affect the exam and hearing all the rumors about the test is going to change. Oh my God. And uh, they gotta take the test now, right? Little do they know, it's not the PMBOK guide that drives what's on the exam. What is the document that guides us on the exam, Bowdy? What's it all about?
Well, you're talking about the exam content outline, the
Exam
ECO.
content outline. All
That's
right,
right.
it's I mean it's pretty obvious what it is. It's called the exam content outline. It tells you what's the content of the exam as an
It's the
outline.
syllabus.
So like I don't know why it's like the number one like PMI piece of literature that everyone ignores. The number of people who actually have a PMP and don't even know about the exam content outline is just ridiculous. Yeah, and so like every time I meet students, whether it's on Reddit or wherever, I always like what this exam content outline? Why don't I know about this?
It's like a
So
little cheat sheet to the exam if you think about it, because it literally outlines like all the things that they can possibly ask on the exam.
exactly, it's like a checklist. Do you know this? Yes or no? And so the it's not new. They've had multiple editions of it, and so every time the test has this megalithic change, it's because of that document. All right, and so there's a study that's done. Have you seen the study that's out right now? PMI should have emailed you a study about their practice guides and stuff. But anyway, they're ramping up. You can tell they're
Right.
getting ready to get this new exam content outline out. The rumor, and I'm not going to say I know people who work at PMI. I'm not going to say that publicly, but late 2025, and we all know the reality is first quarter 2026. For that new exam content outline. Now,
Right.
I'm going to bet that there's going to be test questions on exams that have eighth edition terms on them, though. Because those trial questions they got to populate the
Right.
question pool.
Well, here's a question for you, Mike. What about the PMBOK 7 edition? What about the PMBOK 6 edition? Like, there's gonna be a lot of people that still have those resources. What do you tell those people? toss it out, don't use what should we do with that?
All right. So this is my honest assessment of sixth edition, seventh edition, and what you should do. Um, if you have a seventh edition, what you need to do with that is find a door that doesn't seem to stay open and use it to prop that door open. And then you'll find some utility from that book. It is a waste of space. And even PMI knows it. The year after they published it, they published the PMI Guide to Processes, or it was the process groups, right? Yeah, so the sixth edition has been, I haven't switched ever since like the seventh edition came out.
Right,
Like the exam content outline hadn't changed.
right.
The exam content outline was published right before the seventh edition was published. How can they test you over topics, that weren't in the exam content outline? So
They
like, what do
can't.
you? Everyone wasted their time. And I think this is why I've had three students fail since the exam version changed in 2019. All right. Well, there was I think they updated the exam content in 21 or what I think what was it right now? I think it's 19. Right. But
I think it was like
I haven't
January 2020.
2020, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
so I haven't had a single student fail for a year, but I had three students fail since the exam change. And
right,
the first two were in that like right at the beginning of the exam change, and I was teaching the seventh edition.
right.
And then I switched over and went back to teaching sixth edition. And so even when I was forced down my throat by the provider, like you have to teach these slides, I was like, okay. And then it just went right back to like, this is a topic that's not in the sixth edition, so it's not going to be on the exam. Here's one that is, and
Yeah,
ever since then, I've never had a student fail. I had
right.
one student who failed,
And
you
and
know.
and I with my students too, I would remind them to because that was a question that they always ask was like, Baoyi, if I'm on a budget, like I can only buy one of these, which one should I buy? I always recommend the sixth edition because I think like a lot of the meat and potatoes are like in the sixth edition. Like if you want to dive down deeper into like the 49 processes, sixth edition versus the
Right.
seventh edition. I mean, the seventh edition, there's definitely some terms that they kind of threw in, like when I was going over it, like some stewardship, things like that. But going back to the sixth edition, I think is just more valid. There's a lot of good information. And if you pick up the right edition too, because there's several different versions of the sixth edition.
Yeah.
Because I think the latest one had it's the Pinbox sixth edition plus the Agile guide in there together. So and if you can get your hands on that, I think that's like the golden ticket. I always
Yeah.
tell people about. What do you think about that?
That's always what I've been telling people to do, right? Is get if you go on Amazon and find that old sixth edition and like Agile practice guide packaged together, right?
Right,
That's the one. And like if you look at the sixth edition, like it talks like there's not a single topic in the sixth edition touched upon in the seventh edition. It's just the level of detail,
right,
right?
yeah,
And so like the seventh edition will discuss all of stakeholder management as like stakeholders are important next chapter, and you're like, well, that was like a good 100 pages in the sixth edition. Like, what are you not telling me? But if you actually read the table of contents, it tells you to
right,
like read the seventh edition alongside PMI Standards Plus,
right,
right? And so like the seventh edition costs just as much as the sixth edition. The PMI Standards Plus is going to cost you a monthly fee. So you could do that. And if you actually watch PMI Standards Plus, have you been through that stuff? It cites the sixth edition. So like, okay, or I just buy the sixth edition, and so now the problem is that you can't find it. Like they don't sell it on their website, on the
oh
PMI
yeah, yeah.
website. You got to get it on
You,
Amazon
second
or
hand sometimes.
yeah, yeah. So, um,
One thing that I think one of my student had brought up, he had access to like an electronic library where he works at, and they actually hold they had like a sixth edition there. So I always tell people to check that out. And another thing too is your local library. So I have a library card here. You can go check books out physically, but they also have electronic books that you can check out too. It's the coolest thing. So check it out. Check your li public library near you and see if they have the electronic version of that. And they usually have like a first come first serve, and there's like X amount of electronic version they'll send out, and usually like 30 days at a time.
Right. And there is an electronic version of the sixth edition with the Agile practice guide in it. Great version of it for like search and finding stuff. Um, if you Google around, and you can probably find the sixth edition somewhere, but PMI wouldn't be happy with that, But
Yeah.
like they should continue selling it probably. You know, um, but with the eighth edition, have you had time to check it out yet?
I know on the website. You know what? I have not because I started my new job and everything, so I've been really busy.
Yeah, so the editing window like closed, so I don't know if you can still access it now. But I sent them my edits. I
Right.
don't think they're gonna listen to it, but I swear I didn't like say anything inappropriate in those. I don't think I did. At least I might have been just like, subconscious. But like there was a lot of like just, pulling processes together. They have a process map. I think
Right.
it's like 41 processes instead of
Yeah.
so they just basically lumped a bunch together, especially in schedule management. I
Right.
think like that's kind of my opinion. They just said,
Like,
"Oh, schedule management's all the same. You just make a schedule." And it's like we had like seven processes in that knowledge area, and now there's like four. Like,
right. Now, since you've been doing this for a while too, Mike, you probably noticed like the trends over the years. So, have you noticed like it goes from like, for example, like 40 processes, and then the next one's 49, and the next one it drops, and it kind of goes back and forth. What do you
yeah,
think about
yeah, it
that?
has. I
And
mean, like, so the original PIMBOK guide, well, this one. Yeah. So I'm not my normal, like, I just moved into this house. So this is my normal sound studio situation. I usually have like the library of all of them behind me. And so I just pull them off the shelf as I'm teaching and start throwing them across the room. But like the first edition, it's very fairly concise. It's fairly similar to the eighth edition. Yeah, but so we have seen that like, from 41 to 37 to 47 to like 49 to,
right.
and have you heard the whole like lumper and splitter argument and like P
No, no, enlighten
Right.
me.
So to get a PhD, you're either a lumper or a splitter, right? You look at the topic and say these two things are different, and then you say you're a
Yeah,
splitter. And if
yeah,
you write your dissertation about why they're different, if you're a lumper, you say these two things are actually the same, and your dissertation why they're the same. That's what's going on with PMI, right? These authors like you get like someone's in charge there's a lumper right now. He's like, you know what? This is all the same, and just puts it together in one process. But really, it's the same concepts.
right, right.
So looking at it, I mean, I don't think that, most of my slide decks are going to change too much because it's using the same like lexicon and, they
Right.
added AI all over the place, but
Yeah, yeah. I went through the new Agile course to teach it, and I got to see like some of the questions and things like that, and the formatting is definitely different, a lot more in there. And that's another thing too. Like I always tell people, the PMP gives you like the foundation of Agile, and Agile is just this big blanket term, and PMP talks mainly about Scrum, but then when you go to the ACP side of things, they talk
yeah.
about all like the other types of Agile, which is pretty interesting, and how they laid it out. Uh, and, but yeah, if you get a chance, Mike, I know you don't like Agile, but
I thought I
it
don't
is what
like
it
Agile.
is.
All right. Okay. This is not true. I don't like the misuse of Agile. That's what it is. That's what gets me. And I'm gonna
Yeah,
stick to that
it's,
story.
it's because many organization the term is Scrum butt. That's right. They don't go all the way. They don't go all the way. They'll go try it, and then I think they just give up too quickly. That's what it
I think a
is.
lot of times it's being implemented in places it shouldn't be implemented.
Yeah, and
Like so that's
but
that's
that's
my
the thing.
biggest
I think
problem.
that's where they mess up. Organizations not having like a actual like a um you know a someone that oversees us, right?
And PMI's writing on this is pretty poor. All right. I
Yeah,
mean, like the sustainability radar is the closest thing we have to suggestion of when agile works and doesn't work. And
right,
other than that,
right,
there's like this cheesy chart that they've been using since the fifth edition to explain like back then it was adaptive, predictive, and iterative, and like
Right.
Like
Incremental.
and then like the first one, it had like the variables were degree of change to requirements, and then like degree of like delivery, right?
Right. Right.
And so that chart had been used several editions,
Yeah.
and so I just don't think that's the way to like
I'll give
really.
them credit because I read an article about them joining forces with Scrum Alliance, right? So I think that's going to be like big going forward. And I've been through the certified Scrum product owner certification and course, and it was actually a really good, like a really good course. I'm wondering how they're gonna like merge in the next year or so because they just did that recently.
Scrum Alliance has some good stuff.
Yeah.
I don't put my certificates behind my name, but like I might have been in a couple classes. Yeah, so like no, no, hold on. Now, when you're taking your ACP, are they still dividing up Agile into like iterative Agile versus flow-based Agile? Like
No. So the domain changed, by the way, just FYI.
okay,
So and the domain change, and what I can tell you is a is like I think the PMI slides was like 900 slides, and it's like a 3-day course.
of course PMI gave you 900 slides. Remember the PMP slides are like they're like
Oh my goodness.
860 something slides, and like it's like
Right.
really, and then all these exercises and stuff, and it's like we have 4 days.
Yeah, yeah. Like I
People
don't
don't know. People like who are to watch this video are looking at this
right.
like, what are these guys? Like, we're both instructors. Like, we teach. Like, I had a class last week, and I had well, last week was 35, and like the week before that, I had almost 60.
Right, right.
Um, it's- usually like the classes that I'm teaching are fairly large, and you get like people from all walks of life in
Oh
some of these
yeah,
classes.
yeah.
They run all kinds of methods,
Right.
and like there's not one single person who runs agile the same way, of course. you
Yeah,
know
and I don't think it's supposed to be that way either. And this is what I tell people is like some of the stuff that you're doing, what you're doing, where you work at, might not be wrong.
oh
But
yeah.
for exam purposes, it's just the like you were saying, the lexicon, the terminology, the verbiage for the exam. But some of the action that you do are probably the same. It's just called something different. So I always remind people about that. And also, another thing I always remind students is like, all right, you go through this class, you take this knowledge, but not all this knowledge is going to be applied all at once. Like there will be times where you're like, oh, hey, look, I'm working on this project. It just makes a lot more sense to use this, and that. Whereas sometimes, like for example, when I'm working with my team, prioritizing, features, right? I would use relative sizing, t-shirt sizing, something super easy like that, right? Like a concept from Agile. And then when we're doing like user acceptance testing, it's more like step-by-step instruction. So we'll take a look at like quality standards, quality policies. We'll come up with like those guidance, those activity lists. And for that part of the project, it might be a little bit more of the predictive approach that we would use, and that works right there. So that's what I tell people all the time is that you got to pick and choose what works. Sometimes I'm working with my feature development team, and from time to time, have them do like extreme programming where we or a principle where we have like two developers, one's coding, the other one's checking it, right? So then that can make things quicker, and then we can push that hot fix out later that day if because sometimes whenever you push new features, even though you are testing, things will still break, and then you will have to go back and figure out what happened and fix it, right? So, and again, that's kind of my take on things when it comes to some of the things I've done in the past. What about yourself when it comes to, how do you know when to pick which, approach to use, Mike?
For me, it's where's the risk, right?
Right, right.
I've never thought of like like just selecting a methodology because it's cool or fun, or none of them are fun, right? But like it's
Oh
like, where's
no.
the risk in the project? That is the true
Right.
catalyst for this, and that's what PMI needs to focus in on, right? And that's why I really didn't like components of like the Agile practice guide
Yeah.
and the seventh edition because they shorthanded risk management, which is such a big part of this.
Oh
Think
gosh,
about it
yeah.
strategically from an organization's
Right.
perspective. You have to understand where is the risk in project. If people can die in the doing of the work,
Right.
are you going to use Agile? Are you going to try to find every requirement and plan everything out? Go ahead and explain that to Mrs. Smith why Mr. Smith didn't come home. Well, because
Right.
we thought we'd just find the requirement says, they kicked us in the teeth. Well, no, you better figure it out or you're getting sued. So
Right.
like in those situations where there's like high level effects on risk, right? In the doing of work, whether that's like losing billions of dollars, Jeff loses a foot, you
Right.
better plan it out. That's where it's like obvious that you're going to use a predictive method because you have to. Predictive
Right.
isn't something you want to do. It's something you have to do, right? And so when you don't have that kind of risk in your projects, right, then we get to use another method where the risk is at the end of the project in customer satisfaction or sign off. And that's what brings in like adaptive, agile, kinds of approaches where we're trying to mitigate risk at the end of the project by bringing them in
Right.
cycles. Like we did a little work. What do you think? We did a little work. What do you think? Right. In order to get that understanding of what they want. And so that's why I was explaining. So where's the risk, right? And that's why I'll kind of come down on what method's going to be best for a project. But that's another part of it, right? Like students come to these classes and they think it's like PMI telling them how to run a project, right? That's everyone thinks because the largest word on the book is the word guide, and everyone
Right.
thinks that, like they're going to be told step by step. This is how the PMI
It's
way.
more like a resource.
Oh my goodness, so it's like. It absolutely drives me nuts. Like the number of people who think there's a PMP method or a PMI way or a PMBOK method, and it says it in the book on page 2 twice. This is not a method. And it's like, oh, did we not read it? Like, who's telling you this? Where are you getting this information
Right.
from?
I think it's just a assumption from, if you go to college, you get a study guide and, like that kind of concept, I think is
Yeah.
ingrained in a lot of us. So when we see something that says a guide, okay, this is going to help me, and the word is project management. So this is a book that will help me manage project. But what you're trying to tell the audience is that is this is not what it is, and you can use this as a resource. I know I use this as a resource from time to time. Uh, like a good example was risk management. Like I would go back in there and take a look at some of the tools and techniques that you can use. For example, identify risk, right? Like using a prompt list, using pesto. And you and I are both in the military,
Yeah.
and before we go on operations, we would,
Yes.
risk management is a
Yeah.
huge thing, right?
Of course.
Probability impact matrix,
Yeah.
that's, multiply that and see what the larger the number, the higher the risk, and prioritizing that, and what is our risk acceptance? What will we accept? What's that tolerance level? So you're right, like that is an important part of project management, and you got to be able to identify like when to use it, when not to use it, kind of thing. Because the other thing too is people get overwhelmed, like it's just too much information. So I always tell people like, all right, why are we using it? Because this is the agile part that I do like, Mike, is part of the 12 principles, one of it is keeping things simple, like don't overdo it. I gotta throw it out there. Hey, I gotta throw it out there. I gotta watch out for my agile
The
people out there,
casual
okay?
listener, we got to putting this together. Who are these randos talking to me? All right, so Bowdy and I both served in the military. All right, we were both on the ground, door kicking,
I don't know about the
officer.
door kicking. I'm more
And
like, hey,
this,
you hurt your
it's-
ankle? Let me take a look at that.
yeah. So Bowdy was a corpsman, right, a medic. Um, I was an infantry officer, and we both served in the same time. And anyway. We walked out of there alive somehow, but yeah, here we are. And so we deviated in project management, right? Where I went into oil and gas. I was doing very predictive projects, a lot of very plan heavy, you know, types of engineering project. And Bowdy went off into agile projects. And I'm not
Yeah,
laughing because your projects are silly. That's not it. I was laughing because of your you. I could just tell you're waiting for me to say a joke, and I didn't really
yeah.
have
Actually, I
one.
was expecting one. I'm almost numb to it now, Mike. Like I'm good.
So when we teach these classes, and we do teach classes together sometimes, it is like Bowdy chimes in with some agile knowledge, and then I'll like say something about predict, and we go back and forth about one method versus another. And it's not that there's one really that's better than the other, but like when I do explain agile, I do find it easiest to explain it as 5-year-old project management. And like this is the same way a 5-year-old runs the project, you know, and that's about
Quirky
it.
terms. They have quirky terms. I do like doing like scrum poker with my team. Like
Oh no.
that's fun. And you have to take
Pass
a
around
look
a
at
Kleenex box. Tell me,
a
do you
lot of
pass
the
around a Kleenex? Do you
platform.
guys do the plotted box exercise?
It's
You
like
pass-
no, no.
Okay.
Yeah, but I like right now I'm using Azure. Um and I don't know, I just like how everything is like in a centralized area. I like how you can have your epics and your features broken down to like your PBIs, your product backlog items, assigning like numbers to them, priorities to them, and then you know being able to have like one-on-ones with team members and collaborate with other like stakeholders to kind of get down to how to get this done. You know, like I don't know, I just like working together. Sometimes I feel like some of my predictive projects I worked before, it's more kind of siloed off sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. And I felt like the agile side of things is more collaborative, and you don't have to jump through too many hoops. Like there's not like a hierarchy, like you have to go through this person to that person, you know. Like sometimes it's just like a straight line to the other person that you need to contact, and you just get stuff done, you know. I, and
Let's
that's
bring it
just
to the
my
test room.
experience.
For the listeners thinking, how does this affect me on the exam? Right. So half of your exam questions will be in the predictive world, right? And when we say predictive, that's not just a method, it's a bunch of methods that are considered predictive. The other half of the exam will be agile. They might say the word hybrid, but just answer it as though it's agile and you'll get it right. Okay? So it's like 50-50 predictive, 50% agile. And students will always come back and say, Mike, my test was like 80% agile. And it's like, no, it wasn't. It was 50%. It's a machine. I've seen this. It doesn't like give you more. It's based off of like what's told to do. It gave you 50%. The thing is, you spent 80% of your time on the agile questions, because you didn't either prepare for that one or you just
Yeah,
had to read those questions over and over again. And I hear both sides. My people who are like
right.
know agile inside and out, like, man, that test is like 80% predictive. And it's like, no, it's 50%. You just spent a lot of your time there. Yeah, so it is 50% predictive, 50% agile, and that does affect how you
Right.
answer questions, right? And so in the agile world, right, we always say this is where the team tells you what they're going to do in
Hmm.
agile. And so as a leader, you don't have like the omnipotent power that you would have in the predictive world. You don't have tasking authority, right? And so
It's like the term we call servant leadership. Yeah, you're the
hold on now. Servant leadership wasn't about agile. Servant leadership was published in 1976 at Gonzaga University.
I know, but
Written by a
I'm just letting
Catholic
the
priest.
audience know
It was
that that
talking
term
about
is,
Jesus Christ. It wasn't about agile. I'm
but
pretty sure
I'm
Christ
just letting them
didn't
know
know
that that
anything
term
about
is
agile.
very heavily used in Agile,
Okay.
except for the exam.
It's used everywhere.
I know,
Okay. All right.
but a
But
lot of times when
okay,
they use
I'm
it,
gonna go with your premise. All right. But here's okay. So here's what we need to realize.
right?
This is the situation that we're in as a leader and why we act different in agile projects than we will in the predictive world. All right. And so I'm gonna go back to military land for a second here. All right. As an infantry officer, I have been in charge of 700 people on the battlefield. I wasn't trained to do that, but that's what happened. And I'm having to make decisions that are life and death. And it's not going to be who wants to do this. You're doing that, and you're doing that, or we're all going to shoot each other. All right. So you're going to listen. And so it's very dictatorial in order to make sure everything goes right.
And
But
you
then
don't
I've
have time to
also been part
explain
of,
too, right, Mike?
what's that?
And another thing is like sometimes you don't have all the time to explain.
Right.
Like I just need this to get done right now.
Right. You have to have that kind of like dictatorship at times to make this thing work efficiently. But I've
Right.
also been part of military teams where it's like 7 people. And Benitez is on breach, Reeser's got pyro, I'm on detainees, and we're kicking in the door. And there's no
Right.
rank anymore. It's Baodi, it's Mike, it's Benitez, you know? And it's like, what do y'all want to do? Okay, and we talk it out and we get a consensus because our lives are on the line, right? We're all working together here. Like that's where agile concepts make sense. When you talk about the scale of the team, that's a big player in this, right? And that's something that's sorely missed in all of PMI's literature is scale, right? They don't really talk. I mean, the agile practice, the Agile Manifesto does. It says agile teams are what, 7 people plus or minus two, it's
Right.
a very small group, and so in that case, if you like, you make a choice and it pisses off Johnson, you just lost like 20% of your team. Because that one person makes up a much bigger portion, piece of the pie. So you need more consensus and decision making. The
And
same
another
thing
thing
is,
too
go
is this
ahead.
very customer oriented,
Right. Yes, it's customer oriented.
very
I'll,
customer
I'll go with
oriented.
that. I'll go with that.
Okay,
Sure.
okay.
So often it's like some projects, the customer's internal to the organization, so it's external to the organization. You
Right.
know, um, so what I do like when they're talking agile, right, is that business value piece, right? Adding business value with every iteration that we're doing makes a ton of sense, right? Like,
Product owner, oof.
yeah, you do a little bit of work, you show them what happened, and they say, oh,
Right.
and you're like, well, you use it like that? Like, oh, we didn't, how they're going to use it like that, and like you get this inside, like information on the customer, and like the next piece of work you're going to make for them will be better, hopefully, and we'll take that into account. That was actually a concept that existed in business prior to Agile as well,
Right.
right? It was the whole like quality method, quality function deployment is the name, so using that in like little bits and pieces is what's going on in Agile, right? So we always say like, the process validates scope in the PMBOK guide, sixth edition and eighth edition, seventh edition, it's hot garbage, right? Validate scope is where you're showing the end user what you've done. So in Agile, that's what you're not
Sprint planning. So
review, sprint review.
yeah, because after you plan commit, you do the sprint, and then at the end of the sprint, you do the sprint review where the team demos the work,
Right.
and
That's
then the
the thing.
product owner or the customer signs off on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's validate scope.
Yeah.
Right. So all Agile really is the use of validate scope to transition phases, or a validate scope becomes your phase gate. Yeah, and so this is not a new concept. I mean, it's been
Right.
around. Um, but what we're doing there is realizing what the customer likes and doesn't like, and we can plan that better into the next, sprint or
Right.
phase iteration.
And this is where I think it is important, like for the exam, that you know the difference between predictive and agile.
Mhm.
Predictive validates scope. Agile calls something else, but it could be the same or similar concept. And that's
Hold
one thing
on.
that, say
Hold
again?
on. This is a mistake, and this is like also like unfortunately, I think we're losing a lot of like in PMI, we're kind of losing a lot of our uh how do I say this? Our A team, I guess. Like
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
retiring and they're leaving, and like so the lexicon, the PMI lexicon was never meant to be like the predictive lexicon. That's not it. Right? It's
Right,
supposed to be the umbrella lexicon for all methods, right? So there isn't one predictive method, first of all, right? There are
right.
many. So when people say water predictive, aka waterfall,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
just,
no.
just like I just want to chew glass. Like, are you serious? That's like
You know,
saying,
anytime
hey,
I hear that, from students and now where we call a waterfall,
if
traditional.
AKA waterfalls, like dog, AKA golden retriever, like there are many types of predictive methods. There are many
Right,
of them. It's a bucket of methods. All right, so there's not like one method that follows PMI's lexicon. The lexicon PMI created was the umbrella for everything, right? So, like for example, validate scope would be called, I don't know, design approval in some engineering method that's predictive, right? Whereas in Agile, we're calling it a sprint review with,
hmm
the Agile Alliance. PMI is saying both of those are called validate scope, right? That's the PMI lexicon. It's supposed to be
right,
the
right.
umbrella for everything, and so from that perspective, the PMBOK guide makes so much more sense. And it's unfortunate. I think the eighth edition, the writers of it are just kind of like, I don't know what they're doing. Some of it, I wrote my edits. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to say
Yeah,
anything.
we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens to that eighth edition.
Curious, because there's editors like yourself that goes on there and hopefully some of those goes through.
So can I share an image? Is this going to work if I share an image when I'm doing this? I don't think it's going to work when I share. Share this. Okay. So this um so this umbrella, you see the umbrella image that's showing up on the screen
Mhm.
now?
Yeah.
All right, so the PMI lexicon, right? And it's about like your project manager, meetings, activity list, lessons learned, right? And so then like in the agile specific examples, there's like team facilitator. That's a type of project manager. Whereas like project engineer is predictive. That's a type of project manager or officer in charge in the military. It's a type of project manager. The lexicon term is project manager, right? Um, Another one's like RAM chart. RAM
Hmm.
is PMI. RACI is a type, right? So when we say like activity list, right? There's like a task matrix in your military methods, whether that's RDMP or MDMP. But then like in Agile, it's backlog. All right, so that's how I've been explaining it, to understand the PMI
Right.
lexicon just on the exam, you have to be able to know that okay, this is PMI lexicon time, and then when they ask an agile specific question, it's agile lexicon time, and
Real.
it's not agile from Scrum, it's agile from the Agile Alliance, so
Right.
slightly
Right.
different, a common agile practice instead of Scrum ceremonies.
Yeah, and that's one thing always have to remind students, especially a lot of students coming from like development side things like that, and then what they know. And I was actually surprised too because when I worked for one of the organization, um, I made the assumption that, like developers, they learn Scrum or they learn some type of Agile while they're in college, but apparently that's not it. So some of them actually uh, get get the training at work. So I had to educate some of the team members, like, okay, this is planning, like a sprint planning. This is what we do in sprint planning, and another thing that I like too, it depends on which team you work with. Sometimes they have like a centralized leadership model. Sometimes they have distributed leadership models. Like they'll have someone rotate each, like after a release, we would have like one of the team members kind of fill in, and they run like facilitate a lot of the ceremonies, and that way they can get that experience. Because we're trying to cross train our team members too. That's the other thing, so that they can get all the pieces of the puzzle. Because what we don't want to do is one person's out and then no one knows how to use like like we're using Jira. Like someone would have to know how to pull that up, walk the tickets through, things like that. So I thought that was really useful for some of our team members. And like I said, I assume that they learned it in college or something, but no, they don't. Not all of them.
So when we figure this Zoom live or yeah, YouTube live thing
Yeah,
out, we'll hopefully have people in the chat asking questions, and the goal would be to answer study questions, right? I mean,
right,
today we're
right,
just
yeah,
figuring this thing out. But my hope is that, like apparently it's like the chicken before the egg thing where we need to have a certain number of subscribers in order to have two people live. But
yeah,
the hope would be that we have, people asking questions and we can answer them as specific about a certain topic or something, and that would steer most of the conversation, and most likely the questions would then make us stick to tested topics. But from you and I perspective, we're just going to vent about our classes, and it's just like so. Just want to make sure that when people see this in the future, they're going to look back on it and go, "Oh, that's because they didn't have like interaction with people on like YouTube Live yet."
right,
But
right, yeah,
for the most part, we've just been talking about the predictive versus agile, concepts for exam day. Um, and it's going in the exam content outline, how important that is for a student. Um, Another part I've been noticing is people getting their applications kicked back more regularly. Have you seen that? Applications getting
no,
kicked back?
not my side. Yeah, I haven't.
Yeah, I had a rash of them there in
I did notice like maybe a slight increase in the audits.
audits. Yeah. Now, the audit
Yeah.
was because of the cheating scandal that was going on. And like, I'm not going to blame Reddit for that.
Yeah, right, right.
But like if you're using a promo code from Reddit and there's this thing called the code of ethics, and then you're surprised when like PMI doesn't give you a cert, when you pass their exam. Like, just think about that. You know, um, are you on that Reddit thread, the PMP Reddit?
No, no, I haven't been on Reddit in forever. I've been on a social media detox for almost a year now.
Probably a good thing. Yeah, I don't social media for nothing, but like
Yeah,
I mean, I'm a lurker on Reddit. I don't post much ever. I mean, I answer some questions every now and
right,
again. It's
right.
just, with dyslexia, it's not my best medium, and so I tend to just, every now and again chime in. But for the most part, like I just read everyone else's griping about the exam,
Yeah,
and like, yeah. So, and I did post this, stream on Reddit. We'll see if anyone actually joins in from Reddit to help to ask questions in the future. But I imagine most likely it's going to be students. And so we are kicking off a bunch of open enrollment classes here in the Virginia area this year. And I'll be telling students to join us. And hopefully we'll have, a group every Friday. And maybe Thursday is a better day for this. I'm not sure if Friday or Thursday, but the idea is that we're done with our classes and we're just talking, and not professional, relaxed. You know, we were talking about opening a beer and doing this, but I don't know if we don't have that kind of clout yet. But
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
One day.
one day. But answering questions from students, then using this sort of as a tutorial as well for students who have questions, they can just chime in and ask. And so
Yeah,
that's the
definitely.
eventual goal, right? And hopefully people who do listen to this, realize that we have a lot of experience in what we're talking about here. And when they do have a test question, we'll be able to attack it from multiple perspectives and answer that question. I see it all the time. People post test questions that they've been taken from like study hall or one of the different, study guides. I understand
Right.
that, Bowdy and I have worked for just about everybody, right? We know just about everyone's material. And, you know, the study hall questions have been annoying everybody. Have you heard any feedback from students taking PMI study hall?
Honestly, no,
No.
I haven't. I maybe a few students in the past said that they bought it, used it, it was okay, but I didn't hear anything like bad, but nothing like good. It was just kind of like a meh, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The question pool they're using, I'm almost positive, is like the reject questions. Like they're horribly written and there's like obvious logic flaws in them.
Yeah,
So I'm pretty sure they're just like, they have this pile of reject questions that get submitted
right,
and when they're looking to vet questions. And there's like,
right.
just use these, and fix them a little bit. And then the instructor never does, or they got entered into the question pool without being fixed, and so like they even have questions that are like rated by difficulty. So they have like expert level. And the
Oh
expert
wow.
level really means is everyone misses it because it's so badly written that
Right,
no one
right.
understands it. And so I'm sure that in the future we'll see
I
a
think
lot of
a
those.
popular one is the Pocket Prep.
Pocket prep is popular.
Yeah, I get a lot of questions about that. I was like, hey, which one, and I know when I was studying, like that was one of the resources that I used in the past was the Pocket Prep.
Yeah, their questions are for bang for your buck, they're pretty inexpensive. And full disclosure, they don't pay me to say anything nice about them, but they should. Yes. Like
Maybe one day they'll be a sponsor for one of your
yeah, maybe
future
they'll be the
videos.
sponsor of this thing. Who knows? But like their question bank is deep enough that it'll you won't exhaust. I mean, some people exhaust it during their study, but like they can get several tests out of it. It's not that much money, and you're getting decent questions. My gripe on Pocket Prep though is it doesn't really have a link to the exam content outline per question. Like the
Right,
answer, the answer is like explained, but like, how do I know that's on the test? Like
right.
where is that in the exam content outline? Now there's one organization that does have that, Rural Fireworks. Rural Fireworks is coming out with Rural Fireworks Pro. Their first class is in Manassas, Virginia. I'm teaching it, and every one of their questions in their test bank has citations in the tested literature and goes back to the exam content outline, like bullet by bullet for every single one of them. So you'll be able to like see that, oh, that question is going to be tested. Like this topic is tested, and you can then go back to your notes and read what you missed. And I think that's probably the most efficient way of studying for this thing, right? Good test questions that are about actual test topics instead of something random. Because if you're taking test questions from a question pool and it doesn't take you back to the exam content outline, how do we know this on the test? Like, what are we doing? I can write fake questions. Here, you want one right now? Yeah, the project manager likes blue shirts instead of green shirts. That is how do you know it's on the test? Yeah, so if it doesn't go back to the exam content outline, I don't think you're being very effective. If you want more information on that course, feel free to reach out to me, and I will put a link in the description to that class. And
And
then also,
one more thing too, Mike, that I was going to point out. I was at our local chapter, PMI chapter in my area, and a few months ago, they were talking about the actual AI integration into PMI. So when you get the membership, you also have access to the AI on PMI, and you can it's been trained for project management, so you can actually ask it to generate questions and things like that. So during the charter, we're kind of going over some of those things. So just another thing that I want to just put out there, if you have a membership, check that out. I
yeah,
think I,
I've
I
used
think there's some
it.
value in that. Like
Yeah,
it'll help you with the application too. Apparently,
yeah, well,
we didn't go through all that, but some of the highlights were like, hey, you can check your application. You can use that to help you with questions. I thought that was pretty cool where it's going.
the person who's in charge of that is a friend. I'm not going to name any names on this chat, but so the PMI Infinity bot is the name. And so if you go on to ChatGPT, you can find it, or you can go to PMI's website. They have it all over their website to go to their Infinity chatbot. It does make test questions. Now, I will say the format of those questions when it writes it is very fifth edition, right? Like, it looks and feels like fifth edition test questions, like back in like the 2000, what was that? 2014 era,
Right.
13, 14, 15, and then we switched to sixth. And then like somewhere like the late sixth edition is when we have the more modern formatting of the test question. And so it doesn't really have that look and feel that we will see on a test, but they're decent. And now I have caught it make some mistakes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right? It'll like make up fake answers, but I mean,
Hallucination, yeah.
yeah, it's free-ish, So I mean I say free-ish because it's ChatGPT, right? I mean, if any software is free, then your data is the product and they're like selling your data, so uh something to think about. Now, if you do use ChatGPT, there are some good question bots out there, right? Like, wouldn't it be great if some instructor who wrote test questions writes a test bot, and it's like using the actual like exam content outline, and that'd be nice. Yeah.
Interesting,
So
interesting.
yeah, I think I actually put my name on that too. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I don't think it's public anymore. But anyway, like there are different question chatbots you can use on ChatGPT other than the PMI. As I think the PMI one's a little broad too, when it like 'cause it has a bunch of resources instead of just like the 10 that it should have. Good stuff. Well, I think we're getting a little long in the tooth here for video number one, and hopefully we'll have some live participants and
Yeah.
figure out YouTube live for the next video. But once again, my name is Mike Strachan, and this is Baodi Ngo. Love to be your instructor. Reach out sometime. We'll let you know what our next class is. All right, we'll let you know where we're teaching. Enjoy your evening, everyone.